Joy Davis is a curator, cultural worker, and director based in Baltimore, Maryland. She has conducted relevant work in New York, Los Angeles, and Baltimore for over 8 years. At the core of her work, she believes it is foundational to set standards in the Baltimore area for community relations and celebrate artistic practices. It is important to her to make artists feel that they have a platform to be themselves and explore their practices. In 2018, Joy conceived and created the Waller Gallery with a vision to support artists in Baltimore and beyond through collecting, exhibitions, programming, and collaborative projects. You can read her whole bio on our website, Creative Mornings Baltimore. Please help me welcome Joy Davis to the stage.
Yeah! Thank you. And I think I'm going to get a clicker. We can stare at me for a little bit. Just kind of have a little bit of an inception. Thank you. All right. So the topic is thread. We've already gone through that. But as I was thinking about this topic and I was approached by Creative Mornings, I see a lot of familiar faces that walked in afterwards. This is wonderful. I was thinking about this idiom, thread the needle. I use it a lot. I don't always use it, but in recent time, I've been using it quite a bit. It also, as I was thinking of images or visuals for this, I found this wonderful GIF of the mouse from Cinderella getting the thread together. This is by far probably the easiest way I've seen someone thread the needle. We're going to talk about some sewers. Okay, that was a sewing joke. I snuck it and you caught it. Okay, let's go. You're making it easy so fast. Okay. So what does it mean to thread the needle? Also, I'm a scholar by trade before I got into being a curator and cultural worker. And so I found all these wonderful definitions of thread the needle. Did we all know that this was a children's game? How many people knew this? This is very new to me. Okay, so there's a few people. I would love to try this game out. So if we want to huddle afterwards in the parking lot and try this game, I would love to do that. It's also from Wiktionary, to manage and find harmony or strike a balance between conflicting forces and interests. And also, of course, I had to include a Reddit definition because by all means, this is nowhere. This isn't a Merriam-Webster, this is nowhere, but Reddit always being a helpful hand in defining language. Lastly, how I define it, weaving or finding the line to problem solve or achieve a goal. Oh, and I should mention that the Reddit user's name is Boom Boom Room, which I just think is so funny. Oh, the image didn't show up here. That's so strange. Okay, so I'm gonna stand in the middle here. This is gonna be an image of my parents, and this is who inspired me to thread the needle. I'm gonna describe the image to you because it's one of my favorite images of my parents. They're at a party and my mom is throwing up her middle finger. So they're having a grand old time. So I would be remiss if I didn't at least tell you what you would be seeing here usually. My parents really were pivotal in telling and talking to me about balance. A lot of people think I get that from being just a Libra, right, if you believe in such things, but really they provided a level sense of balance between how you live. Ooh. Here we are. Ooh, behind the curtain. Oh no, it's not there. It's okay. I know, right? No, I didn't see any extra tabs. I'm actually quite jealous. So they taught me the balance between thinking about your values, but also enjoying yourself, finding joy in what you want to do, thinking about what you want to do in life or how you can serve your community on top of how do you make a living. So they really did teach me balance. They came from different sets of values while they often overlapped. And I just try to carry that legacy with me, what they've taught me. And so that's really where it started, was at birth. But I figured you didn't want to hear about in 1988. So that's my shorthand. Let's see. There we are. Okay, so how do I do this? Initially, I was going to do a case study about multiple people in the field, but you all came to kind of hear me talk, which makes me very uncomfortable, but I want to talk about myself. I might as well take the opportunity. Thank you. As I mentioned before, or as was mentioned before, I started Waller Gallery about 6 years ago. In April, we will be 7 years old. Very proud of this. And it's really important, how do I thread the needle with Waller? So this was my first business to start. This was the first space that I started in. If you look over here towards me, to your left, you will see the first incarnation of Waller Gallery, still in the same location. And then if you look to the right and to the bottom, you'll actually see now it's renovated, there's more white walls. And we really thought about how to thread, if I could, and weave. I'll be using that word quite often. How to weave a sense of community, break down kind of the intention around the white box, as well as also thinking about the artist and potentially what their needs are. We always try not to use the words needs, but try to infer from communication. And that really started before I started Waller Gallery, but to put it in practice was quite challenging. And also finding what is the balance, again, the balance between capacity, what the artists were looking for, and also what we could hope to achieve as far as visibility for those artists. Because it's great to work with artists, but if we're not really giving them much visibility, it supports them only really halfway. So we're seeing some wonderful images here. I also just want to point out to the right, I want to give a shout out to the marketing associate, Chino Arancaya, who works with us on all of our social media. So I always try to give him a shout out. Just a beautiful examination of all the wonderful people that have come through our space. So how do I thread the needle at my other role at Creative Alliance? I'm the visual arts director at Creative Alliance. I have about 2.5 roles within my one role. You know. And really what you're seeing here is over the course of about 2.5, 3 years in my time there, I think I've been there 3 years a week or two ago. I've really been thinking about how to readjust the curatorial program there. I also work with wonderful resident artists, 8 resident artists. This is my time to actually plug an upcoming event. Later today, this evening, there will be an artist talk and tour by Faith McCorkle, her sister Hope McCorkle, and the wonderful artist Villager at Creative Alliance. It starts at 6, ends at 8. We have a bar. It's not open, but it's open to you. So we would love to see you there. I would love to have you there. To the left, also before I even go into what you're seeing here, I often get the question, how do you balance and manage my role at Waller Gallery as well as my role at Creative Alliance? I get that question a lot. And I would say that part of threading the needle, right, as we saw, super easy, and that made it seem like it was the most magical way to thread a needle at the beginning of the slideshow. It just isn't usually that easy. However, some of the ways in this more metaphorical sense, ways that I do that is aligning my missions across the work that I do. That's just a simple fact. It's not so simple in execution, but it certainly makes it easier to develop this practice. So, to the top left, you are seeing an exhibition, an actual event shot of an exhibition called Unidos en el Arte. It is our second Hispanic Heritage Month exhibition we've done at Creative Alliance. And it was really important for me to connect the work that we do in other areas of that space to the visual arts program, which isn't, I would say, both in the history I've been there, as well as my predecessors, we haven't done a great job of. So this was my attempt to continue to do that work. In the center here is We Are Present. I'm particularly proud of this exhibition, not just because I got to work with indigenous groups from around the Delmarva DMV area, but also I got to listen to different stories and really talk about the diversity within multiple different groups of people. And I've also been able to work with, I think, 2 or 3 of those artists that you're kind of seeing here. And on the bottom, I just want to always name drop another resident artist, Marjoni Merriweather, who did her finale show as a part of being a resident artist at Creative Alliance. Okay, so this is my last case study about myself, Walk On By. So Walk On By is a project that I started about 3 years ago in partnership with Baltimore Sister Cities. And this is another way in which we weave, right? We thread the needle, or that I do in my work, I should say. As you can see, there's a lot of names and partners and websites and things here. There's just so many. There's logos. There's so much happening here. And really, that speaks to how in the work that I do and some of the people I know are in the audience do their work. It's not just me standing here. It's also a team of people, a team of support, and a modicum of funders, thank God, to fund what we do. I first want to talk about the artists, and I want to share a little bit about them. So Walk On By is an exhibition, like I mentioned, I started about 3 years ago in partnership with Baltimore Sister Cities. Its focus is on 3 Baltimore-based artists and 3 Rotterdam, Netherlands-based artists. And we wanted to discuss the Black diaspora, or more specifically, the Black Atlantic, through the lens of this show, to the wider audiences. It will tour in Rotterdam next year, but it first came here to Baltimore. As a part of this, we also did a cultural exchange. So it was really important these artists have a rich history of working in community, working with students, so I knew that they wouldn't like tear each other's hair out. And they're very intentional about the work that they do. So they could sit for 7 days in a van and travel around the city and really have meaningful connections, right? I make a joke, but it really is important, right, if we're engaging in deep conversation, that they actually want to be around each other. And not for nothing, a lot of the choices that I made with them had a lot to do with threading the needle of putting them together, and I'll share a little bit about what they do or how I paired them together in just a moment. I also want to make sure I name drop Christopher Chester. Christopher Chester, does anybody know Christopher Chester and his work? He just was a part of a book called Scene that just came out, so you should check that out. But Christopher Chester was our graphic designer and really built the outward language, the marketing language for this whole project, which was really crucial and included language from both diasporas in his work. Also, I should also mention I didn't mention them, but Tent Rotterdam, where we're going to be hosting the exhibition, and also our wonderful financial partners. All right. All right. So here are two of the artists that were paired together, Torona and Sean Champion. Torona representing the Netherlands, and Sean Champion representing the United States. And they have a very interesting way in which they work with the human subject. Is anybody familiar with Sean Champion's work? Just did Voyages? Yes, let's go. And they both have a really interesting way in which they talk about dignity and culture without necessarily exploiting the central focus or the principle of that work. So they want to define that, they want to celebrate that. And dignity was a word that was used recently in an artist talk that we did. And these artists were paired together. I mentioned a little bit of the criteria. So it wasn't just aesthetic, it was also in how they were thinking about their work, what was the missions and values for their work, as well as what they want to do out in the world at large. Can you all see over here? I feel like I'm okay. All right. Next, we have Charles Mason III representing the United States and John Seedorf from the Netherlands. Are we familiar with Charles Mason III? He's a neighbor to the space. Okay, cool. So both of these artists, again, weaving, right? Weaving together their use of color or antithesis to color, and they use it for different ways. They also depict the Black experience in many different ways and also obscure it as well. In a recent talk, so I feel I can say this publicly, Charles has talked about how flowers do represent Black people. He's just abstracted that to kind of pull you in, and you wouldn't necessarily know. So you're getting in on a secret about his work that isn't always defined through a label. With John Seedorf, he has both Surinamese and Indonesian background and grew up in both the Netherlands and Suriname, and also does similar things, maybe obscuring parts of the body, and I would say definitely not as exaggerated in the abstract. I should just start using foot movement. Okay, last we have Cole Feast and Naomi King. They were woven together because first and foremost, because they work on murals, and they work on community murals specifically. Are we familiar with Cole Feast? Yes, I love this. I love that y'all are in it. I love it. I just love that I can come to a space and people are really tapped into the artists and the art ecosystem here in the city. So that makes me very happy. Cole Peace and Naomi both work on community mural projects, and what I mean by that is that word gets thrown around a lot, but they really do have intentionality to actually work with the community, request, in most cases, I'm going to say not all, request permission, and work directly with whatever neighborhoods they're actually working with. Naomi King is doing, I think, 2/3 of an old theater now in the south part of Rotterdam, so feel free to look her up. And Cole Peace is away right now in a fellowship. It's quite wonderful at a museum in South Carolina. So they're very active. Okay. All right, so this is the question for the crowd. I'm going to call on 2 people. We're going to do this rather quickly. Just be prepared for the question. It's coming back. I promise. There it is. Okay. So in my about 7 to 8 years of doing mentorship and working directly with artists, as well as other art administrators and curators that were looking to me for advice, I've noticed that success is not a great word. It doesn't really actually articulate what the goal really is. Also, has anybody seen this illustration before? So I didn't know where it came from. I've just seen it. It's just kind of proliferated and has become a part of its own, kind of how memes do. They become their own beast. This is actually from a book from Dimitri Martin, writer and comedian, called This Is a Book. And of course, often people see success as very linear. I think now in this day and age of, the year our Lord 2024, we no longer think it's so linear. It's so, there's no barriers there. And I also think, going back to, this is my other sewing joke, this is more so what it looks like when you're trying to thread a needle, right? And try to lick it. Sometimes you have to recut it. Sometimes it's not cooperating. The needle is bent. So the metaphors can go on and on and on. And I should probably get somebody else up here to do that. But really, to me, I just wanted to bring that up. This is just me getting on my platform to say that success doesn't always look the same for everyone. And I don't think that should be a metric to do what you want to do, is to be utterly successful. That goalpost can always move. We should really be grounding ourselves that we're doing the work we feel passionate about. We're trying to do the least harm as possible. And so that often, again, looks like this crazy mess. All right. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. All right, so we're going to the audience. I need 2 people. How do you do this in your work? And by this, I mean thread the needle. Yes, you in the back. You can come on up if you want. Unless you feel you can project your, I don't want to put you on the spot. Thank you.
Yeah, and please say your name. Okay, I'm Gina Casbaro. Thank you for this talk. It's been incredible. And I am a life coach and a feng shui consultant. And for a while, I feel like I struggled to figure out, okay, how do all these things meld together? How do I communicate this in a way that's clear and succinct? And I was talking to someone else about this the other day, of what is that common thread between the work that I do? And it's all about mind, body, spirit. And everything that I do, any event, any experience, any session is going to weave through those things. So to be able to know that common thread is really useful, and know that no matter what I'm doing, what I'm offering is always going to have elements that help people connect to the power of their mind, the power of their body, the power of their spirit, and that's the common thread throughout it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. One more person. How do you thread the needle in the work that you do? Oh, wonderful. Oh, and a mic is coming to you. We're doing this on the slide. We did not prep. Kira's just very on it.
Hi, I'm Alicia Haskett, and one of the things that I do is I create safe spaces for Black women to show up in their authentic, sensual selves. And then I also do that by teaching other boudoir photographers how to do the same and how to work with Black women in an authentic way, so they don't have to feel like they have to put on a character of what they think we are and why we need to be shown exact authenticity as they work with their white clients.
Oh, that's beautiful. What was your name one more time?
Alicia Haskett.
Thank you. Just so we get that. I really asked this question, and I wanted to engage with you all in this question because I think, I get to work, my background is in fashion history. I get to work with artists, which gets to work with textiles. That's a pleasure for me. But oftentimes people don't see how that applies to them. So I'm so happy you all gave non-art or art administrative ways in which you weave, right? It's really embedded. It can be a practice that we embed in everything that we do. Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll take this one. You give the mic.
Oh, yeah, right, questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Joy. We're now into the question part of our segment. Who has a question for Joy?
Joy, that was great. Thank you. I have a question about balance. And I think about discernment and how we say no to make room for the yeses. And so I'm curious about your process around that. Is it criteria? Is it a gut thing? I'm always refining my process around that, so would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, this is coming from a person I think that has mastered this better than others, so I will do my best. Do my best. So I just want to restate to make sure I'm correct. So like, how do I say no, and how do I use discernment in my work? That comes up a lot. That also is the other side of the answer of how do I balance. And I would say sometimes I make mistakes, and sometimes that also will reel me in. So I just want to be very transparent about that. Mistakes also help us, and I think it's a shame when people are seen as successful and they're kind of like, I got it all together. I never make a mistake. I'm never late to a meeting. Like, that's just not realistic, even if you're not really doing a balancing act. So I'll say that first and foremost. Discernment is important in the work that I do because I am approached by a lot of artists to work with me, with Creative Alliance, or even a colleague of mine. When it's a colleague of mine, I like send them off to the colleague and they use their own discernment, unless there's, I don't know, maybe there's like a red flag I see in an email. For me, working with an artist, I base it on logistics, right? Like when I talked about Waller and Creative Alliance, it comes down to logistics. I try to make, and it's not to be cold, right? You when interacting and engaging with artists or interacting and engaging with people, it's not so much that you're like, this is my boundary, like F off, right? Like it's really to say like, hey, like, our schedule is full, right? Be transparent and honest. And that's how I use discernment, if that makes any sense. It's not so much based on something that's emotional, which I feel like sometimes people think about discernment. It's more based on logistics. And in that, I'm being transparent. In that, we can have a broader conversation. And also, I will say, just using the example of artists approaching me, sometimes I can connect them with another space, right? So I have vehicles, and I'm always about connecting and broadening or enriching the art ecosystem here. So that prompts me to do that work, which not everybody has the time to. So I try to make it when I can. Great question.
Hey, Joy. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, okay, cool. Hey, I'm
Hi.
Jameer Robinson, for anyone who doesn't know. So my question is, like, being a person who's actively doing a lot of things, I'm sure you have a lot of ideas. How do you sometimes, like, let those extra ideas go into the world and share them without feeling like, oh, I got to do it myself?
Oh, this is how do you just generally let go is the first part of that question. Then also, how do you give it away, right? So first, I always, to let go of an idea, I usually write it down, even if it's just on like my Keep app or in a notebook. And I think that's important because you can always return to that idea. Even if you look at that idea 5 years later and you're like, that was not fleshed out, but I like the core of this idea. So let me run with it now. I'm in a space, or I have the partners, or I'm in a place to execute that idea. So I always try to actually hold on to it, but not necessarily in my brain or in my spirit, right? Like I've let it go because it's sitting somewhere, I can return to it. And that goes for almost any idea I have, even if it's about like, I don't know, like a paint color in my house. Like I just, I try to like think about it, ideate, get it down on paper in some place I can return to it. Around giving your ideas away in a way, right? Like, or sharing your ideas. I think that can be tricky. So I'm happy to give you like personalized advice based on maybe what you're thinking about. The full transparency, I know Jameer. Jameer's great. I've worked with the Jameer. Just like peep that. They're great. So I mean, I would say as far as like actually giving your idea away, it's really like, do you think that sometimes I'm not the best person to do something, and my idea is actually better served for somebody else? I cannot think of a specific example right now. But what I will tell you is I'm actively thinking of ideas I can give away as it relates to Walk 'em By and the exchange between Rotterdam and Baltimore. So that's an active process that I'm doing, which is different for me, not because I hold my ideas, but I don't know that I've ever really generated a lot of ideas for others. And maybe others I don't have in mind. Like I don't have a person in mind. I'm just like, we got to do this. We have to figure out who would do this, who would execute this idea. So yeah, sometimes you're just not the best. So sometimes you have to give it away. Sometimes you don't have the resources, and someone will take care of it and nurture the idea as well. So does that answer your question? Okay. Someone over here. Shall I give him, do you want to come up?
Oh, I can. I just
Okay.
don't see the hand. Raise your hand higher. Oh, there we go.
They're,
Thank you.
they're at the complete opposite side of the room.
Okay, so my question is about threads. Haven't really thought out through the question, so it's happening in real time. So I guess I'm curious, like in your own personal journey, the thread of being intentional with how you're creating your professional and personal experience alignment and learning of the threads that you created in the past to kind of balance out your next step forward.
Ooh, someone should write a paper on that. That would be its own case study. Because I think it's a nuanced question. I think that's why I think that's why some of us get stuck on that question also about like how to weave, because sometimes it's about we were just talking about letting go. So sometimes it's actually letting go of ideas that you think of and being open and responsive to new ideas or new processes that are coming through. And it's not always an idea. Sometimes it's like a way of doing that comes to you. I will also, what is the best way to say this? So when I was in undergrad, I'll just give this as an example. I didn't know that fashion history was a thing you could study. I thought you would have to go through art history and pick a specific focus, but I was really yearning to do this. So I had to do like a lot of deep research at the time. Now it's changed. I hope it's changed where it's a little more visible, but it wasn't very visible and it was very constraining on how to do that. So at the time I was like, so if this is not possible, how can I start melding together like what I want to do that's feasible for me, because I was operating either on loans or my own, paying for my own, graduate school. So like how can I weave these things together? And even when I got to grad school, I found that there were pieces that were missing from my learning. So I had to figure that out. Like I had to figure that out. So I would even map out, I use a lot of like working in physicality. So I would even map out what those ideas are and start to see what those connections are. Not in your head. If you like virtual, do a virtual app, or just literally writing it down. Even if it doesn't make sense, sometimes it's very difficult to start linking things together when it's in your brain. I feel like I'm not the first person nor the last person to really say that, but I really do mean that. That's it's a practice we kind of have put ourselves in where it's like, no, I have to figure it out up here. It's like, you don't have to. You can like sit it down. You can start making references. I think that's why I don't do it myself, but I think that's why, what is it called when you put the images together? And you're like manifesting? Yes, collage. Vision board, thank you, vision boarding. That's why I think vision boarding can be a unique tool to figuring those things out, right? Because you're like piecing together like what does this look like? How does this work? Does that answer your question? Okay.
Hi, I'm Aliana. My question is, so you started Waller Gallery in 2018, right?
Yes.
So between then and now, what would you say your biggest growth area has been? Like, what's the thing that you look back and you're like, wow, like I've grown so much in this area, aside from the physical space?
Yeah, because the physical space actually had a transformation. There's multitudes of things that happened. Number one, I knew what like my limits were. I learned a lot about what my limits were. And that became important in asking for help, but also setting myself up for success in that space. And especially before I was at Creative Alliance, I was at the Walters. So figuring out how I was going to really balance that role helped me understand my limits. So really, that was a huge, not knowing them, but learning them became like a huge growth period and continues to be like, and tapping into that. And again, I use my own advice. I don't always do that, but I actually like allowed processes, new processes to come in to change how I was doing things, and not just being like, I've always done it this way, I'm always gonna do it this way. I just allowed change to kind of come in. So those are two big growth areas. Thank you.
All right, I'm coming across.
Hey, good morning, Joy. How
Good
you
morning.
doing? Speaking of learning, My question is, how do you find in your practice leaving threads behind for others?
This is a great question. I've been this kind of tackles a couple of other questions as well. I really limit the free labor I do around advice and mentorship. And I do that purposefully so that I'm talking to students or I'm talking to art administrators that are actively in their practice. So that's one way that I do that. Now, that's a smaller way, right? Like, I'm not reaching hundreds of people, but my hope in doing that and doing it that way is that I'm not overexerting myself, so I'm really sticking to my mission and vision, and I have clarity about what I'm talking about, but also, hopefully, they're also expanding. Like, if I can seed that, if I, in a way, can have, like, a legion of people that use what I do, they're also spreading that out as well. So doing talks like this is great. I love doing tours with students of all ages. I love talking even to organizations and bringing them in for tours for that reason. So it's a little bit smaller. I haven't scaled up so big yet. Walk on by is probably like the biggest scale of what you're talking about. And really the hidden purpose of Walk on By is to make sure, and just I'm looking at everybody in the audience, to make sure you know you have access. There are resources through Baltimore Sister Cities with other organizations, especially Baltimore Rotterdam Sister Cities. So I just want you to tap into that. And Rotterdam is a wonderful place. Would love for you all to come with us next year in March. But I really want to make sure that that's clear. So I'm doing it right now by saying there's resources. Go get those. Please come talk to me afterwards or email me, which I don't think I put my email up here, but please come email me. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you, Kira. Good morning, Joy, and everyone. What is the youngest age group that you've worked with to show them the business side of what you do? Because you are apparently very organized, you have focus,
We try.
I know you try. But at what age do you feel that you want to expose them to the other side of what you do? Thank you.
So I would say that's another growth area, going back to that question of how to articulate that to folks. I think the role that I do is, I wouldn't say complicated, but there's so many pieces. So I usually start around high school and up. I don't usually do anything younger than that. However, there's a lot of programs out in the city that work with students even younger to think, I would say, more narrowly on how the business of art. So it's not that it's impossible. It's more so me trying to make sure I'm not overloading, because it's a lot of information, right? If I just start with like what I do and how I do it, just starting there for someone younger than that. But there are programs out there. I think about Greenmount West Community Center, RISE, that work with everybody's student age, but like, younger than high school. And I know I'm missing, there's probably like 8 more organizations out there that do that. Yeah.
So Joy,
Yes.
it's the end of the year. You do so many things. This talk has been like just really showing your expertise in so many ways. I'm curious of like, at this time of year, I feel like a lot of times people use this as like a reflection point, and you've talked about like reflecting on ideas and things like that. How do you carve out space? Do you have any rituals or ways to kind of do that reflection work? And is it, just thinking about this time of year, is it now?
So reflection work for me is a bit of self-care. Not only like, my own person, I'm talking just business-wise, that's actually a bit of self-care for me. So I've, over the last year and a half, become very militant about self-care. And I would say that's actually a part of my self-care ritual, like wash your face, take a bath, your meditative practice, checking in on your resilience levels, right, which is something no one talks about, but like checking in on your resiliency. But really reflection points is actually, that's a part of my general self-care. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
I went
that
off.
was great.
Okay.
That was great. I mean, I'm so glad to hear that you're making space for self-care among the million hats that you wear.
I had to work at it. That was like, I had to fight myself.
Yeah.
That's a story for a different day, but I had to fight myself to have self-care.
And I think
some people know that because they know me personally in the audience, but yeah, that was the thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that definitely in like this kind of environment where many creatives wear or have like multi-hyphenated titles like yourself, wearing many hats, that having that actual self-care and not just taking a bubble bath, although a bubble bath's great.
Yeah. I mean,
Is
I love a good bubble bath. Well, because I'm like stationary, right? Like it's actually more meaningful than just say, take a bath. Like it's like actually it's like a space, like I'm not gonna waste the water. So, you know, like there's just like certain like practical, I always go back to logistics. So it's like very practical. Like this is like time for myself. This is time like sit there. Like don't get up. Like these are conversations I have to have with myself. Yeah. Very militant in here. It's very militant and regimented. The love is very militant in here in my brain. Yeah. It's all in love. It's all in love.
Yeah, help me not welcome and thank Joy.